Recording in progress. All right. Every actual relationship in the world alternates between actuality and latency. Every individual, you must disappear into the chrysalis of the it in order to grow wings again. In the pure relationship, however, latency is merely actuality, drawing a deep breath during which the you remains present. The eternal you is you by its very nature. Only our nature forces us to draw it into the it world and it speech. The it world coheres in space and time. The you world does not cohere in either. It coheres in the center, in which the extended lines of relationships intersect in the eternal you. In the great privilege of the pure relationship, the privileges of the it world are annulled. By virtue of it, the you world is continuous. The isolated moments of relationships join for a world life of association. By virtue of it, the you world has the power to give form. The spirit can permeate the it world and change it. By virtue of it, we are not abandoned to the alienation of the world and the de-actualization of the I. No, nor, nor, nor are we overpowered by phantoms. Let's read that again. By virtue of it, we are not abandoned to the alienation of the world and the de-actualization of the I, nor are we overpowered by phantoms. Return signifies the recognition of the center, turning back to it again. In this essential deed, man's buried power to relate is resurrected. The wave of all relational spheres surges up in a living flood and renews our world. Perhaps not only ours. Dimly we apprehend this double movement, that turning away from the primal ground by virtue of which the universe preserves itself in its becoming, and that turning toward the primal ground by virtue of which the universe redeems itself in being, as the whole, or I'm sorry, in being, as the metacosmic primal form of duality that inheres in the world as a whole in its relation to that which is not world, and whose human form is the duality of attitudes, of basic words, and of two aspects of the world. Both movements are unfolded fatefully in time and enclosed, as by grace, in the timeless creation that incomprehensibly is at once release and preservation, at once bond and liberation. Our knowledge of duality is reduced to silence by the paradox of the primal mystery. There are there are the spheres in which the world of relation is built. The first, life with nature, where the relation sticks to the threshold of language. The second, life with men, where it enters language. The third, life with spiritual beings, where it lacks but creates language. In every sphere, in every relational act, through everything that becomes present to us, we gaze toward the train of the eternal you, in each we perceive a breath of it. In every you, we address the eternal you. In every sphere, according to its manner, all spheres are included in it, while it is included in none. All spheres are included in it, while it is included in none. My computer's freaking out. Um, Through all of them shines the one presence, but we can take each out of the presence. Out of life with nature, we can take the physical world, that of consistency. Out of life with men, the psychical world, that of affectability. Out of life with spiritual beings, the noetic world, that of validity. Now they have been deprived of their transparency and thus of sense. Each has become I'm sorry. Now they have been deprived of their transparency and thus of sense. Each has become usable and murky, and remains murky even if we endow it with the shining names Cosmos, Eros, Logos. For in truth, there is a cosmos for man only when the universe becomes a home for him with a holy hearth where he sacrifices, and there is Eros for him only when beings become for him images of the eternal, and community with them becomes revelation. And there is Logos for him only when he addresses the mystery with works in service of the Spirit. The demanding silence of forms, the loving speech of human beings, the eloquent muteness of creatures, all of these are gateways into the presence of the Word. But when the perfect encounter is to occur, the gates are unified into the one gate of actual life, and you no longer know through which one you have entered. Of these three spheres, one is distinguished life with men. Here, language is perfected as a sequence, it becomes speech and reply. Only does the word formed in language encounter its reply. Only here does the basic word go back and forth in the same shape. That of the address and that of the reply are alive in the same tongue. I and you do not only stand in a relationship, but also in firm honesty. The moments of relation are joined here and only here through the element of language in which they are immersed. Here, that which confronts us has developed the full actuality of the you. Here alone, behold, here alone, beholding and being beheld, recognizing and being recognized, loving and being loved exist as an actuality that cannot be lost. This is the main portal into whose inclusive opening the two side portals lead. When a man is intimate with his wife, the longing of the eternal hills wafts about them. The relation to a human being is the proper metaphor for the relation to God, as address here is accorded a genuine answer. But in God's answer, the all reveals itself as language. But isn't solitude too a portal? Does it not happen sometimes in the stillest lonesomeness that we unexpectedly behold? Cannot intercourse with oneself change mysteriously into intercourse with mystery? Indeed, it is not only he that is no longer attached to any being worthy of confronting being. Come, lonesome one, to the lonesome. Simeon, the new theologian, addresses his God. There are two kinds of lonesomeness, depending on what it turns away from. If lonesomeness means detaching oneself from experiencing and using things, then this is always required to achieve any active relation, not only to the Supreme One, but if lonesomeness means the absence of relation, If other beings have forsaken us after we had spoken the true you to them, we will be accepted by God, but not if we ourselves have forsaken other beings. Only he that is full of covetousness to use them is attached to some of them. He that lives in the strength of the presence can only be associated with them. Excuse me. The latter, however, he alone is ready for God, for he alone counters God's actuality with the human actuality. And again, there are two kinds of lonesomeness, depending on what it turns to. If lonesomeness is the place of purification, which even the associate needs before he enters the Holy of Holies, but which he also needs in the midst of his trials, between his unavoidable failures and his ascent to prove himself, this is how we are constituted. But if it is the castle of separation where man conducts a dialogue with himself, not in order to test himself and master himself for what awaits him, but in his enjoyment of the configuration of his own soul, this is the spirit's lapse into mere spirituality, and this becomes truly abysmal when self-deception reaches the point where one thinks that one has God within and speaks to him. But as surely as God embraces us and dwells in us, we never have him within, and we speak to him only when all speech has ceased within. A modern philosopher supposes that every man believes of necessity either in God or in idols, which is to say, some finite good, such as his nation, his art, power, knowledge, the acquisition of money, the ever repeated triumph of women, some good that has become an absolute value for him, taking its place between him and God. And if only one proves to a man the conditionality of this good, thus smashing the idol, then the diverted religious act would all by itself return to its proper object. This view presupposes that man's relation to the finite goods that he idolizes is essentially the same as his relationship to God, as if only the object were different. Only in that case could the mere substitution of the proper object for the wrong one save the man who has gone wrong. But a man's relation to the particular something that arrogates the supreme throne of his life's values, pushing eternity aside, is always directed toward the experience and use of an it, a thing, an object of enjoyment. For only this kind of relation can bar the view to God by interposing the impenetrable it world. The relationship that says you always opens it up again. Whoever is dominated by the idol whom he wants to acquire, have, and hold, possessed by his desire to possess, can find a way to God only by returning, which involves a change not only of the goal, but also of the kind of movement. One can heal the possessed only by awakening and educating him to association, not by directing his possession toward God. If a man remains in the state of possession, what does it mean that he no longer invokes the name of a demon or of a being that is for him distorted demonically, but that of God? It means that he blasphemes. It is a blasphemy when a man whose idol has fallen down behind the altar desires to offer to God the unholy sacrifice that is piled up on the desecrated altar. When a man loves a woman so that her life is present in his own, The you of her eyes allows him to gaze into a ray of the eternal you. But if a man lusts, but if a man lusts after the ever-repeated triumph, you want to dangle before his lust a phantom of the eternal. If one serves a people in the fire kindled by immeasurable fate, if one is willing to devote oneself to it, one means God. But if the nation is for him an idol to which he desires to subjugate everything because in its image he extols his own, do you fancy that you and only you, I'm sorry, do you fancy that you only have to spoil the nation for him and he will see the truth? And what it, sorry, I have to read that again. But if the nation is for him an idol to which he desires to subjugate everything because in its image he extols his own, do you fancy that you only have to spoil the nation for him, and he will then see the truth? And what is it supposed to mean that a man treats money, which is unbeing incarnate, as if it were a god? What does the voluptuous delight of rapacity and hoarding have in common with the joy over the presence of that which is present? Can Mammon's slave say you to money? And what could God be to him if he does not know how to say you? He cannot serve two masters, not even one after the other. He must first learn to serve differently. Whoever has been converted by substitution now has a phantom that he calls God. God, however, the eternal presence, cannot be had. Woe unto the possessed who fancy that they possess God.